Hello. I'd like to ask everyone to take their seats, please, so we can get this event going. Hello, and welcome everybody. My name is Andrew Browning, and I'm Executive Vice President of the Consumer Energy Alliance. I welcome you to the only forum in the 2014 Colorado campaign cycle dedicated solely to energy issues and the consumer perspective on energy. I'd like to let everyone know that this event is being broadcast live on the web, streamed, and so anything that you don't want people to catch you doing on camera, just remember you are on camera. I would like to recognize this conference sponsors. We have 18, and I'll list them all at the end of the show, but particularly the Colorado Business Roundtable, Vital for Colorado, and the Colorado Farm Bureau. And the CEA members who support, counsel, and sweat equity allow us to gather here to discuss these important topics impacting energy security, jobs, and the Colorado economy. For those of you who are just being introduced to Consumer Energy Alliance, CEA is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that brings together the energy producing and energy consuming sectors of our economy for discussion and advocacy of the key strategic energy issues of the day. With over 270 company and association members nationally and close to 400,000 individual consumer members, CEA is dedicated to both educating the general public about energy and advocating for a sound and balanced energy policy for Colorado and the nation as a whole. I recommend you visit our website at consumerenergyalliance.org to find out more about who we are and what we do. There has been much public discussion and media coverage of energy development in Colorado, particularly shale development, both on its impact as a game changer on how we power our economy, how we view energy security, and on issues involving local control and regulation of energy development. As we are debating and learning how to sustainably develop these new vast resources, Colorado is well positioned both in the U.S. and as a global leader on energy production and regulation. Other states and even other countries around the globe are watching Colorado, and what we do here, the regulations we develop, the policies we implement in Colorado will have an impact nationally and even internationally, so we need to get this right. This forum and our discussions with Colorado Senate and gubernatorial candidates will hopefully shed some light for you on their positions, not only on issues involving shale development, but their policy stances on other key energy issues, proposed EPA greenhouse gas regulations, grid modernization, net metering, renewable electricity standards, and rural electric development, issues that are vital to our economy, our livelihoods, and our way of life. I'd like to introduce the MC of the event, Jeff Wasden, who's president of the Colorado Business Roundtable. Jeff is also as well as president of the Colorado Business Roundtable. Jeff is head of the Business Leaders for Responsible Government Group and the Legislative Action Committee for the South Metro Denver Chamber of Commerce, and he is the Chamber's vice chair for public policy. He also serves on the Littleton Firefighters Board and is very active in the community as well as on the political front. Please welcome Jeff Wasden to the stage.
Thank you, Andrew. It is truly an unbelievable honor to be here with you today. I want to tell you before we get started, it takes a lot of skill to time catching a cold, the exact opportunity to be the MC today. And I can tell you the reason why was to try and be a whole lot less Aflac Duck and a whole lot more Matthew McConaughey. So let me know how that works today. All right. So it is an unbelievable honor to be here today representing the Colorado Business Roundtable. The Colorado Business Roundtable, we uniquely understand the impact government has upon your communities and the business culture and environment. It is truly tantamount to the success of each and every one of you in this room and those listening through live stream today. Colorado Business Roundtable is a proud sponsor of today's Energy Forum. We are blessed to work with so many great leaders, great partners, and great organizations. I'd like to give an extra shout out, of course, before we get started, to the media that's here present and to the ICOSA media team who's doing our live streaming today as well. One of the things you learn about, that not only are we here talking energy, but every time you turn on the TV, you understand there's an election going on. There's a little bit of some ads being happening here in this political environment, and you start to learn words like internals and what internals mean. And actually, as I was driving here today, I received an email from one of the congressional candidates with their confidential internals, probably shot to about 20,000 of their closest friends. But those internals share a little bit of insight. Well, I did my own internals as well as I got ready to moderate and MC this event here. And I think the number one question or fear was, is this going to be funny, Jeff, or serious, Jeff, today? My wife's last words were, Jeff, lose the jokes. So my role today is to try and create a fun, engaging, fast-moving, impactful dialogue on this important topic. So with that, we're going to jump right in. Congressman Cory Gardner is a fifth-generation Coloradoan. He was born and raised in Yuma, Colorado, a small town on the Eastern Plains. A neat side note is he actually lives in the same house that his great-grandparents lived in. He graduated with honors from CSU, received his law degree from CU, which is pretty good playing both sides of that fence there, Cory. Well done. Cory was elected to the House of Representatives in 2010. He is consistently recognized as one of Congress' brightest stars. Cory still lives in Yuma with his wife, Jamie, two children, Allison and Thatcher. The Gardners are helping the population boom in Yuma with a third child on the way. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Cory Gardner.
Thank you. Where would you like me? Right here? Perfect. Well, good morning. How's everybody doing? It is great to be here. And Jeff, thank you for the introduction. You know, if you look at my bio on the website, it does say that my wife, Jamie, and I and our two children live in a home in Yuma, Colorado that once belonged to our great-grandparents, but it was my great-grandparents. It was several months ago when somebody was reading that bio, and the way they said it was, Cory and his wife, Jamie, live in Yuma, Colorado with their two children with his great-grandparents, which was a little inaccurate. We don't live with our great-grandparents. It is great to be here. I am excited about the future of Colorado and Colorado energy. We, for the first time in any of our lifetimes, have the real possibility of becoming North American energy secure. Canada, the United States, Mexico working together to power our economy, to power jobs, to power education, to power security, to heat and cool our homes. We can produce it all in our backyard. And instead of sending billions and billions of dollars overseas to companies that wish to send that money back to the United States in forms of attacks against our interests and our allies, we can keep that money, those jobs, and that opportunity right here. You think about the leading edge of manufacturing. You think about the European nations who were looking at the United States with incredible envy at our ability to produce energy right here at home. But it doesn't happen unless we have an environment, a business environment, a resource environment that allows us to continue to develop those energy resources. And that is why, as a member of the United States Senate, I will fight hard and strive for the development and implementation of a national energy plan that is focused on one thing, an all-of-the-above energy strategy. Now, what does an all-of-the-above energy strategy look like? Of course, it has to deal with the issue of regulations and the issue of regulatory overreach by several different agencies, whether that is the EPA, whether that's the BLM, making sure that these agencies are protecting our environment, protecting people, our land, air, water, but making sure that they are not strangling the ability of us to develop our resources. We need to pass legislation like the RAINS Act. The RAINS Act is a regulation that simply says this. It does what the state of Colorado does in terms of a rule review bill. It says this: if a rule or regulation has a certain economic impact, then it has to go to Congress for approval first. We will expedite the permitting of exporting liquefied natural gas. That was my bill. We passed it out of the House of Representatives with incredibly strong bipartisan support. That bill, if it were enacted, could lift 45,000 people off of the unemployment rolls. It has not been heard in the Senate yet. I support renewable energy, championing energy savings performance contract, making sure that we extend the production tax credit, pay for it, ramping it down like it was always intended, making sure that we have master limited partnerships available not only for oil and gas companies, but for renewable energy companies as well. Responsible and balanced use of our public lands. Yes, recreation. Yes, tourism. Yes, making sure that we protect our environment, but allowing our coal resources, our natural gas and oil resources to be developed as well. Making sure that we are protecting our resources in terms of water. Because if the EPA continues and implements the Waters of the United States regulation, which will federalize every molecule of water in this country, in this state and country, it is going to be difficult to continue producing our energy. And I will make sure that we approve, pass, and build the Keystone XL pipeline. We can do all of this. We can do all of this while balancing the importance of our environment. Our Four Corners Plan, the Four Corners Plan that I have taken across the state of Colorado, is about energy independence. It's about growing jobs and the economy. It's about making sure that we have a brighter education system for our children and grandchildren. And it's about making sure that we are protecting our environment for generations to come. And so we will make sure that Colorado families have the great state to live in that we all cherish so dear, while we also have a striving, growing, and thriving economy. Look no further than downtown Denver, Colorado, and the recent reports in the Denver Post that highlight the majority of energy jobs are concentrated in Denver. The majority of energy jobs in the Front Range, 30% of the real estate, the office buildings in Denver, occupied by an energy company. This is the future that we can embark on. This is the future that we have embarked on. And together, if I'm elected to the United States Senate, I'd be honored to have your support. We will make sure that we continue to power our economy with Colorado clean energy, Colorado green energy, and Colorado resources. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you can. Cory, as I mentioned, we've all seen a few ads recently. While many want to talk about your perfect hair, or as The Economist called it, the Mona Lisa smile, I want to focus on a different ad. And I want to see if I can get this right. I'm Cory Gardner, and I'm a new Republican. Cory, what does that mean? Can you explain that and talk to people about the setting of the ad and why that ad came out? What does a new Republican related to energy mean?
Absolutely, Jeff. Thanks for the question. You know, we were excited about presenting options to this country that are about solutions. One of the great frustrations I've had, and I think many people in this country have had, are too many people go to Washington, D.C., and they're opposed to different things. They're opposed to this, they're opposed to that, or they say no to this, they say no to that. But what we know we can do, what we know we have to do, is put forward a positive agenda for this nation. And that's what that is talking about, what we can do to represent a new generation of leadership in Washington, a new generation that is truly about an all-of-the-above strategy. And when I say all-of-the-above energy, I don't mean that we're going to pick this, pick that. We're going to need it all in order to be successful. And so it is about wind energy, it's about solar, it's about geothermal, it's about hydro, it's about coal, oil, natural gas. It's about those things that are going to make this country stronger. And so that all-of-the-above energy strategy, that national energy policy, a new Republican is making sure that we are putting in place solutions, being about ideas first, and presenting that positive agenda for this country. That's what we're talking about.
Well done. Congressman, the next question. Renewable energy, you talked about that, alternative energy, oil, gas industry, everything is booming. But the problem out there in the audience, and again on the live stream, is American consumers these days are spending nearly 9% of their household budget on energy. Gas prices at the pump are still way above $3 a gallon. What can you do? What can be done about this burden put upon hardworking American families?
You know, and that's really it. If you look at what is happening in our economy today, there seems to be a real veneer. You look at the Wall Street numbers, and then you look at the Main Street numbers. And here's what's happening on Main Street. Over the past several years, median household income in Colorado has declined by over $4,000. Over the past couple of years, the hours worked by people in this state has declined. We've seen in the news just this week as employers are cutting back hours. That means the American people are working harder than they ever have, harder and harder each and every day, only to find opportunity that's slipping from them because their salaries, the middle class hasn't had a raise since 1999, and that's because of the failed policies out of Washington, D.C. I believe we can do better. And if you look at what is going to make our economy grow, it is about abundance of energy jobs. It's about making sure that we have abundant, affordable energy opportunities. And look what's happening in Washington, D.C. You have the president and his allies that are passing on regulations that are killing coal jobs in Colorado, that are making it more difficult to utilize our public lands responsibly. that are shutting down energy production on public lands. Look at the unemployment rate on Colorado's western slope compared to what's happening in Weld County. The private energy development in Weld County versus the public land development on the western slope. Look what we could do if we had an energy policy that was about making sure that we promoted it all. The EPA regulations, instead of having a Colorado state-based approach, the idea is that Washington knows best and they want to put Washington's will on Colorado. If the EPA has its way, energy bills will increase by about $1,700 per family in this country. 250,000 jobs will be lost under the new EPA regulations. And according to IHS, a company headquartered right here in Douglas County, those same regulations will increase cost to the economy by $50 billion. That's too much on Colorado's family. My opponent has said that he supports a carbon tax, but he won't put a price on that carbon. When I asked him how much a carbon tax a carbon tax cost, he refused to answer the question. So we don't know what his carbon tax will cost, but we do know what his support of cap and trade would have cost. There are many farmers and ranchers in this room. This event hosted in part by the Colorado Farm Bureau. Several years ago, when cap and trade passed the House of Representatives, I received a letter from, I believe it was YW Electric and Highline Electric, two rural electric associations on the Eastern Plains, who said, under that bill, the average cost for a farmer who had a sprinkler on a quarter of ground would increase by thousands of dollars per pivot. Now, if you're a farmer on the Eastern Plains, and you have irrigated farmland, you probably have more than one irrigated quarter of ground. So to a farmer, the cost under cap and trade would increase by thousands and thousands of dollars per operation. And what does that result in? That results in higher food costs, higher production costs, and all of this, whether it's higher regulatory costs, higher food costs, who does it hurt the most? It hurts the people in this country who can least afford it. People of low income, people on fixed income. The people who can least afford it are the ones who are hurt most by the policies of big government Washington. I believe we ought to put more Colorado in Washington and less Washington in Colorado. And that's why I ask for your support, and I'm excited to be here today.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Congressman Cory Gardner, candidate for U.S. Senate.
Thanks, Jeff. Thank you. Take care. Thanks.
United States Senator Mark Udall is a family, 5-generation worth of West-loving, outdoor-living public servants. Before Mark turned to public service, he ran a successful nonprofit, Colorado Outward Bound. It was then that he met his wife, Maggie. They live in El Dorado Springs and are proud parents of 2 kids, Jed and Tess. He has climbed all 55 Colorado 14ers, which is about 55 more than me. Senator Udall's records show him as a champion of Colorado's wildland and natural resources. Mark serves on the Senate Armed Services, Intelligence, Energy, and Natural Resources committees. One of his goals has always been to bring a good dose of Colorado common sense to D.C. Please join me in welcoming Senator Mark Udall.
Thanks for the nice introduction.
All right, we're all good here. Hey, good morning, everybody. How are you? You know, it's a wonderful day outside. I wish we could sit outside and enjoy what was so special about Colorado. And one of the reasons Colorado's so special is that we're leading the nation when it comes to energy production. If you think about it, we've got solar energy in the San Luis Valley. We've got wind towers all over the Eastern Plains. And we've got natural gas and coal on the west slope and, of course, in the northeastern portion of our state. And we've got innovators who are taking ideas here in Colorado, and we're showing the nation how we can responsibly develop these resources. I think about Thomas Jefferson, who famously said, and I'm going to paraphrase him, he said that a true patriot is someone who loves his country not just for what it is, but for what it could be. And that's certainly what motivates us as Americans. And when it comes to our energy approach, that's Colorado's approach. And we do have what I like to characterize as a best of the above approach to energy. We've found newer and better ways to develop our abundant traditional energy sources like natural gas, alongside exciting new technologies like solar, biomass, and geothermal. And we understand that our energy sources don't just power our cities and our businesses and homes, they drive our economy. And I'm a senior member of the United States Senate's Energy and Natural Resources Committee, and every day I get to brag about Colorado and I get to bring our approach to Washington. Some of you may remember that in 2004 I led the effort to pass Amendment 37, which set in place a renewable electricity standard. I was proud to lead that effort with then Speaker of our State House, Lola Spradley. And in a pretty tough election campaign, 2004, it was a lot of fun, and I think it was inspiring to see a Republican and a Democrat campaign together for Amendment 37. And we've shown through the implementation of Amendment 37 and the other policies we have in place that we can keep electricity rates low, we can improve energy efficiency, and we can invest in new energy technology while also reducing carbon emissions. And our success here is while I'm pushing to pass a national renewable electricity standard. I believe, like all of you in this room, or I think so many of you in this room, that this bipartisan idea will spur innovation and create jobs nationwide, much like it did here. Now, as important as renewable energy is, Colorado also is uniquely situated to lead the nation in the development of our traditional forms of energy. And that's why I was the first member of our delegation to introduce legislation to expedite the export of liquefied natural gas. I strongly believe that Colorado's natural gas has a special role to play in today's world, not only creating jobs here at home, but also supporting global stability abroad. My common sense approach would streamline what the U.S. Department of Energy's process is today to approve natural gas export facilities and then green light exports to all of our allies and our trading partners abroad. If you think about it, our natural gas can be essential to helping our allies and our trading partners stand up to international bullies like Putin, who use their natural resources as a weapon. But for Colorado's natural gas to play this role, we need to work together to develop it. That's why I was proud and the governor was able to work across a whole host of stakeholders, some of you in this room. I was proud to be a part of that effort to avoid a costly and counterproductive ballot showdown over fracking. And I very much look forward to the Blue Ribbon Commission's findings, and I'm going to do everything in my power to support community-driven solutions. The way forward is to be what I like to call us, which is rugged collaborators. We know when we sit down and work together, we move Colorado forward. So I just want to conclude by saying, over the last 6 years, it's been the greatest privilege of my life. It is the greatest privilege of my life to serve as a United States Senator from the best state in the nation, Colorado. And I'm going to continue to work across the partisan divide to find a way forward so that Colorado continues to lead in this important area of our economy, but also, as we all want to protect our air and our land and our water and particularly our special way of life. So thank you for your support. We are in the campaign season, and this is, I would say, one of the longest job interviews you'll ever have. But I just love traveling the state, getting a sense of what we're doing from the carbon sequestration research in Boulder to the ways in which we're harnessing hydropower at small and medium, in some cases large levels, to the work that EDF is doing out on the Eastern Plains to capture the methane from a dairy farm and then feeding that into our pipeline. There's just so much going on in Colorado that is really, really inspiring, and it's also driving an economic renaissance here. So again, thank you for inviting me. I wish I could stay because I love the business of energy and the technology and all the new developments, but I know that I'll have a chance to catch up with you and get the summary of what you all discussed today. And I'm happy to answer a question or two if there's time to do that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator. We do have a couple questions for you here. You know, the good news about being elected is you have a record. The bad news about being elected is you have a record. So I'm going to give you a chance to kind of talk a little bit about maybe a particular piece of legislation that, through lack of information, unintended consequences, maybe you were just flat out wrong, didn't work out the way you intended, and then certainly a chance to kind of brag about something you've done in the energy sector that you're very proud of.
Yeah, I think the legislation in particular that I'm proud of is what we did with Amendment 37 in 2004. And we've really seen the job creation that's been generated and we've seen Colorado take a leading role, not just in the country, but around the world when it comes to the best of the above energy approach that we have. You know, I don't, the first part of your question, I have a few regrets in life. One of them is that if my mother were still alive, I'd apologize to her every day for how I behaved as a teenager. But the one legislative vehicle that I supported that I believe we would all have been better served if we'd kept in place is a law called Glass-Steagall. And if any of you have been watching the series on the Roosevelts recently, we had a Great Depression in the 20s that bled on into the 30s, and it took us a whole decade to recover. And the Glass-Steagall legislation put in place limits to what investment banks and investors could do in the way of holding lots of different kinds of securities and lots of other financial instruments. We repealed Glass-Steagall at the turn of the last century in 2000. And I believe in part it led to what happened in 2007 and 2008, because a lot of financial institutions became way overextended. We had a housing bubble. We had a stock market that was overvalued, and we all paid the price. The good news is, though, Jeff, we're coming out of it strongly. Our economy here is leading the nation. We have relatively low unemployment. We got a lot more to do, though, to make sure that the middle class and working people benefit from an economy is turning around. That's why the energy sector is just so important, and what you do is so important.
I'm going to ask the same question I asked the congressman a little bit ago. We talk about the big boom right now in the oil and gas industry. Renewables are up. But the American consumer is being burdened with up to 9% of their budget right now on energy costs. So what are some steps, what are some things that you can do to lessen that burden on the hardworking American families?
Look, specifically when it comes to energy costs, let's keep in place the smart incentives that we have for both traditional and renewable energy producers. For example, the natural gas community members that are here understand the importance of the IDC. I've been proud to support extending the IDC. On the renewable side, let's make sure we keep the production tax credit in place for wind. I went to the floor of the Senate and gave some 27 speeches to ensure that we extended the production tax credit. We have to get a long-term signal to the market when it comes to wind power. Another really important thing we can do is make sure the National Renewable Energy Laboratory is fully funded. As you know, that's a gem. They're working across the board on everything from carbon sequestration technologies to better storage to how we use energy more efficiently. They're working on buildings which use about 40% of our energy in this country, making them more efficient. These are all investments we can make, and in the meantime we can celebrate that Colorado has some of the lowest energy prices in the country. But we have to be vigilant, and we have to make the investments on the front end so that we continue to develop these new energy technologies to keep energy prices reasonable and also create the jobs that come along with these new technologies. So I'm totally bullish on Colorado in that regard. The other thing I would add is that I led the way, and actually I'm going to add two things here. You know, I sit on the Armed Services Committee, and I know the importance of energy security. Can you imagine, as we continue to be more energy independent and more energy secure, we won't have to protect oil supply lines to the extent we do. Think about the turmoil in the Middle East. A lot of it is because of oil and the ways in which oil drives the decisions that those governments make, and our dependence on that oil involves us in a region, and sometimes it doesn't allow us to be as honest a broker as we need to be. So the military is really involved in this, and the military is leading with lots of new energy technologies. The Marines are fighting in a lighter and more agile way because they're not so dependent on batteries. They carry solar blankets. The Navy is developing drop-in biofuels, which is, I mentioned briefly, but that's a big part of what we're doing here in Colorado. The Navy ran an entire exercise using drop-in biofuels in the Pacific year before last. So they understand the importance of being more energy secure. The point I started to make was the Navy also leads in small modular nuclear reactors. And it might surprise some of you, but I'm a strong proponent, and I've authored legislation that is doing more research in the use of small modular reactors. Because if you want to lower carbon emissions, they can replace aging coal-fired power plants. The ground is the containment vessel. They're passively cooled. They can be scaled up from 50 megawatts to 250 megawatts. So nuclear has to be a part of our future energy technologies. And I believe climate change is occurring. The scientists in Colorado who lead the world have made it clear. We've seen drought, floods, fires. Well, we're positioned to respond and lead the world and create new jobs in the process, secure our national standing in the world, and also keep faith with the environment. That's a fundamental difference in this race I'm in between my opponent and myself. If you don't believe in climate change, as he doesn't, how can you be part of the solution? And how can you lead the way when America innovates in producing these new technologies? And I have every faith in America and every faith that we can do this. This is our history. We're going to lead the world when we have the right kind of policies, the right willpower, and the right commitment. So that's, again, I'll end on this note because I'm getting going. I get worked up on this. That's why it's such a honor to represent Colorado in the United States Senate, because we are leading in so many ways, and we have so much to be proud of, but we're not going to stop. That's the Colorado way as we keep climbing the mountain. So thank you for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking U.S. Senator Mark Udall. Well done. All right, joining me on stage will be Mr. Andrew Browning and our Governor, John Hickenlooper. After the Governor addresses each and every one of you today, we're going to be getting some questions from our moderator, Andrew Browning, who you got to see earlier. Andrew is an Executive Vice President with the Consumer Energy Alliance, one of our primary sponsors of today's events. The mission of the Consumer Energy Alliance is to improve consumer understanding of our nation's energy security, the need to reduce reliance on imported oil and natural gas, maintain reasonable energy prices, and continue efforts to diversify our energy resources. Andrew oversees CEA's initiative to develop a more positive narrative on shale development. Andrew is also a partner with HBW, and again, Andrew will jump on stage in just a second here, but it's my pleasure to introduce Colorado's 42nd Governor, John Hickenlooper. John came to Colorado. Yeah, that's a. John came to Colorado in 1981, appropriately enough, as an exploration geologist in the oil and gas industry. I still think to this day he claims it was an economic downturn that cost him his job, but we'll let him clarify that. In 1988, he opened the Wine Coop Brewery, then a struggling lower downtown. That grew into 14 brew pubs, 2 microbreweries. John ran for mayor in 2013. As mayor, he became a leader in regional collaboration. After a successful run as mayor, John ran for and was elected as governor in Colorado in 2010. Governor Hickenlooper wants Colorado to be the best place in the country to run a business and also the most military and veteran friendly. Please join me in welcoming Governor John Hickenlooper. Good to see you. You bet. You go, Axel.
I'll do it here, yeah. Thanks for the kind introduction. Thank you all for being here. And it is, one of our interns went and looked, and I am the only professional geologist in the history of the United States ever to be a governor, which I'm not sure what that says, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's a good thing, but it's certainly unusual. I also, you know, when the price of oil collapsed in the mid-'80s, our company got sold in 1986. Everyone got laid off. I was out of work for a couple of years until we opened the Wine Coop Brewing Company, as he said, in lower downtown. Back when the rent was $1 a square foot per year in lower downtown, people made jokes about the fact that I went from one fluid with dissolved gas in it to another fluid with dissolved gas in it. You know, you can't, I look at where the state has come in the last 4 years and kind of what we've been through, and the backbeat through it all has been energy. 4 years ago, the economy was upside down. We had $1 billion budget deficit in the state government. We were 40th in job creation. In 4 years, you come back through 4 years later, and we've had 13 federally declared disasters in Colorado, between droughts, wildfires, floods. We had the 2 consecutive worst year droughts since the Great Depression. We've had the 2 most devastating seasons of wildfires in the state's history. And last year we had the most destructive flood in our history. So we've come through with 13 federally declared disasters. That doesn't include the shootings in Aurora at the movie theater or the shooting in Arapahoe High School. And yet through that all, come forward to today, and we have moved from 40th in job creation to 4th. We have become the #1 state in the country for workforce. We are, according to Business Insider magazine a month ago, we're the #1 fastest growing economy in America, despite all that opposition. And a big part of that has been our ability to kind of come together and resolve critical issues, and nowhere has that been more apparent than in energy. We have a golden opportunity in Colorado, as we do in this country, to deliver. I can't see that. It's at the, oh, I thought I was supposed to have 15 minutes, no? She had a big red sign saying stop, and I was saying, wow, I'm in trouble. I'll have to cut all the jokes. So if you look at how we did that turnaround, agriculture in the recession was a big part of that, but so was energy. And I know firsthand that the energy revolution in this country is more than just inexpensive natural gas. It is actually making our world a safer place. Certainly we're not faced with the types of decisions in terms of international security we would be if we were importing as much fuel, as much energy as we were. And certainly it allows us to keep more dollars in the household budgets of everyone. If you look at the results of inexpensive natural gas in those places where we do the majority of our heating of homes with natural gas, we're talking, hundreds of dollars of additional money into household budgets every year, and many of those household budgets, a couple $100, several $100, in many cases can be up to $700, $800, $900 a year. It makes a huge difference. We have some of the fastest growing communities in the country, Douglas County, Weld County, 2 of the fastest growing counties in America. We have now 4 of the top 10 metropolitan areas in the country in terms of technology startups per capita. And again, I would argue that a lot of this energy, or a lot of this energy is as a result of the energy industry. We have taken on a number of the challenges around the new energy economy, and we are, I think, a model state in terms of all of the above, right? We have embraced renewable energy, wind and solar, but at the same time, we've looked at these new technologies, the marriage between horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing, and the consequent issues that have been raised, right? You remember the hysteria 3 or 4 years ago about the composition of what's in a frac fluid, right? Well, we were one of the first states to actually reach out and find a compromise with the service companies to make sure that they could disclose. We ended up with a press conference with the Environmental Defense Fund and senior executives from Halliburton, with both sides declaring a successful resolution. They were able to release enough of the components of the frac fluid without endangering their intellectual property, but release enough so that the environmental community felt satisfied. We approached methane regulation, and again, rather than just having one side or the other dictate, we got everybody in the same room. We focused on making sure, and my commitment to the oil and gas industry was, and I think that there was an issue of whether they were losing the public trust, that social contract that allows any industry to operate. And they recognized it. Certainly the larger operators in the state all sat down and said, all right, what's this going to look like? And my commitment was, A, that there would be no red tape or bureaucracy added. B, that every dollar they spent would go towards actually making air cleaner. And C, that they would get their fair share of credit with that. And I think, the first several months where we had the experts from the industry and the experts from the environmental community, the first several months were just working on defining what do all these studies say, and how do we all get to the same set of facts. And once we got to that point, then it was, again, another 6 or 8 months of work to say, all right, how do we get the greatest amount of improvement of air quality, but at the same time do it for the least amount of cost? And to the industry's credit, I think their cost is going to be somewhere in $60 to $80 million, but we will have dramatically cleaner air. It will be the equivalent as if you took out, I think it's 90% of all the vehicles in the state of Colorado and suddenly had them not emitting any and having any carbon emissions when they were driving. And again, we ended up with a press conference where we had senior executives from Noble and Anadarko, a number of the companies, but also senior executives from the Colorado Environmental Coalition, the Environmental Defense Fund, both sides saying this is success. And I think in the future, we have a commission now. I'm sure I'll get asked questions on the commission. But we had 2 ballot initiatives that most of you who are from here, I mean, I'm sure you followed it closely, right? It would have, if those ballot initiatives had stayed on the ballot, we would have driven tens of billions of dollars out of the state. And certainly my opponent, many people have said, well, we would have won, you know, a mandatory 2,000-foot setback or total enactment of local environmental laws. Neither of those would have passed. Well, you can never know that, right? And the very fact that they were on the ballot was a significant risk. The wrong TV ad, had those passed, it would have set the overall energy industry back significantly in the state of Colorado. And the challenge now is we've got they're off the ballot. We now have a commission with 21 people on it, really looking at what is the balance between local control and the extraction of hydrocarbons. And if you look at it if you squint your eyes, both sides have a point, right? Anyone who, and most of us, if we were asked, people have a right to the quiet enjoyment of their homes. At the same time, someone who owns the mineral rights, oftentimes those mineral rights were owned before the house was ever built, but a citizen has a right to the fair market value of what those mineral rights were. Government shouldn't take it away. And so that conflict between the intrusion on quiet enjoyment of the extraction of those mineral rights is, I mean, those are it's a conflict. Both sides feel they're right. And the way this has always worked in civilization is you bring the sides together and you try and find what is a fair resolution. And that's what this commission is going to work at. And I think they're going to do it. I think there are ways that you can, you know, and sometimes it's going to cost a little more, right? If you're close to housing or a hospital, there's almost always electrical power there. Well, there are now drill rigs, and they're being used in Colorado that don't use diesel fuel. They use rubber grommets, and they use electrical energy, so they're quiet. And they can wrap the drill rig so that you don't have that Christmas tree, all that light. And once the well's drilled, we can measure, we can make sure that the collecting tanks are bermed, or they're not so unsightly. There's a hill kind of covering them up, or we can pipe away the oil, the natural gas from the site so that we don't have so much truck traffic, there's not the noise, there's not the dust. Again, it's a little more expensive, but most of the oil and gas industry recognizes that if you're going to operate closer to where people live, there's going to have to be accommodations. I look at the future of not just Colorado, but this country is closely tied to energy in so many ways, and that we have, you know, obviously a lot of work we've got to do and making sure that we keep the lines of communication open. But we have a golden opportunity to really, you know, move society forward. And even as we move towards cleaner energy, making sure that we also have energy that is affordable. So I appreciate you all being here. Look forward to the questions. Try to keep my answers concise so we can get more questions. What?
Okay. I was just getting the motion for a couple of questions for you.
Perfect, right? Well, I'm ready for questions. Thanks you all for being here.
Thanks for joining us, Governor. So I'm going to start off with a couple of questions on oil and gas development, as you surmised. The interface between shale development and local communities has come to a head in Colorado with the proposal and withdrawal of energy-focused ballot initiatives and the establishment of your task force on oil and gas production. What are your ideal outcomes for this special oil and gas task force?
Great. Well, I thought we'd get to it later, but it is probably, I think it's probably the most important thing I've ever worked on, was getting those initiatives off the ballot and making sure that we got in place, you know, a broad cross-section of civic leaders that can really address the question. I especially like that we're sitting on bar stools.
Yeah.
You know, that's a joke, just kidding. I think the ultimate what our hope from this commission is that they make a series of recommendations to the legislature that can then be enacted into statute, and to really begin to find out what are the compromises by which we can mitigate the impact of, drilling and production operations on the quiet enjoyment of people's homes. And the further we've gotten into it and looked at best practices around the country, there are a number of mitigations. Again, we're not going to be able to make everybody happy, but I think there are places that there can be some local control, where county commissioners and mayors can have a voice and negotiate with the oil and gas company. But as they do that, they have to recognize the primacy of private property, that these mineral rights are somebody's property that they've purchased or they inherited, but that they've had for a period of time, and in many cases long before there was housing anywhere close to them. So that we have to balance those two competing rights, and make sure that, and this commission, I should be clear, the commission has to have a 2/3 majority to make any recommendation to the legislature. And they can make recommendations to the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, towards rulemaking. The primary thought was they would do recommendations to the legislature, but there's no limitation on that. But it does have to be 2/3. And again, we tried to pick people on that commission, and if you look down the list, it's a pretty impressive group of people that are balanced. Because the solution to this has got to be, neither side is going to win. There's going to be a balanced resolution that respects property rights, but also does everything it can to protect an individual's right to quiet enjoyment.
Thank you. How are we doing on time? Jeff? Okay. In my opening remarks, I outlined how the rest of the country is kind of looking at Colorado right now, and this is we're a point center on this issue. And how do you feel this process will affect energy production in other states and regions, for better or for worse?
Well, I think it's going to be looked at, assuming we can find our way to these compromises. I think it's going to be looked at as a national model. We've worked very hard to make sure that we have a number of the environmental community, representatives of the different portions of the environmental community involved, and also that we have the large oil companies, the independent companies, and some of the small oil companies represented, so that when we do find resolution, everyone can say, all right, that's not my first choice, but I can live with it. This is an issue that's not just in Colorado. It's in Pennsylvania and Ohio. It's in New York and Texas. It's in Wyoming. And I think everybody's trying to figure out, how do we balance these two competing needs? And again, it's just rolling up your sleeves and doing the work and making sure everyone stays in the room. And that's one of the things that Colorado's best at is again, bringing people together, kind of governing from the middle.
Okay. Could I throw one at you on electricity?
Of course.
All right. Colorado currently generates approximately 2/3 of its electricity from coal and about 1/5 of generation from natural gas. However, in the coming years, the future of coal-fired power remains uncertain due to pending EPA carbon emission regulations on new and existing plants. Understanding that Colorado's population can grow upwards of 15% by 2020, how would you help expand electricity production to meet this growing demand?
Well, we have a balanced portfolio, as you described right now, and coal's not going to disappear anytime soon. It's going to be a part of our energy portfolio for a long time. But we have done, before I ever became governor, we passed the Clean Air, Clean Jobs Act that really looked at taking some of the really older and more polluting coal plants we had and transforming them into natural gas plants, which does several things. Right? It allows us to have the more intermittent, renewable sources of energy, like wind and solar. When the wind dies down, and all of a sudden you've got to make sure you maintain your energy load, natural gas electrical generation can cycle up and cycle down much more efficiently and much more cleanly. And that's a crucial part of making sure we do have more, gradually more renewable energy there, and making sure that we protect the cost. At the same time, we're still looking at and working with the coal industry. How can they how can their fuel be used more cleanly with fewer, lesser emissions. Governor Matt Mead, who's up in Wyoming, has been working very hard on this to say, all right, we've got these large coal deposits. It's almost like a savings bank. How do we, is there a way to get there and harvest this energy cleanly? And again, I'm agnostic. I think we're always going to be moving, and we should move, especially at a mile-high elevation. We need to continually be making sure our air is cleaner and cleaner. But at the same time, we have to recognize that we're using all sources of energy. And in terms of the EPA rules, I think we're going to be pretty close. Once we finish haggling over the language and how the measurements are taken, we've probably done pretty much everything that they're asking to be done anyway. I chaired last year the Western Governors Association. Actually, I chaired the National Governors Association this year. But the Western governors are now looking at how can we all work together and take our regional strengths and weaknesses in concert. And I mean, it's interesting. This climate change issue, and I don't think it's worth getting into a big battle, is, you know, how rapidly is it changing? Clearly it's changing. How much of the mankind's activities are the cause? You know, we all buy insurance for our homes. We don't think we're going to have an electrical fire, but we buy insurance. We should be being very cautious around climate change. And whether you're a Republican governor or a Democratic governor, every single one of us is reducing carbon emissions. I mean, they may not talk about climate change, but we're all doing it. If we work together, I think there's a way to do that much more efficiently and effectively, have a lower cost and yet still get to cleaner energy.
All right, we have time for one more, and I'm going to switch to energy technology. Colorado's impressive universities and colleges have helped advance new research on technologies that could dramatically benefit our energy future. Moreover, their programs have helped train the next generation of STEM, science, technology, energy professionals who are in strong demand. How can these institutions and training centers play a stronger role in addressing the technical energy challenges Colorado faces?
Well, that's a great question. Yeah. I mean, I think Colorado School of Mines, I apologize for bragging. I didn't go there. I wish I did. It is one of the top in terms of benefit for dollar invested, right? In other words, what the kids that graduate there, how much money do they make? It is one of the top, either first, second, or third in the United States. And they are turning out tremendously talented people in the energy industry. But we need to kind of continue scaling them up. Same thing with CU and CSU. One thing we've been trying to do, and when I ran for governor 4 years, there are a lot of things I didn't know. I didn't recognize that a company like Halliburton, which is one of the largest oil field service companies in the country, their hemispheric headquarters is in Denver. Their global headquarters is in Houston, but they run their operation for South America and North America out of Denver. And so we've worked to try and get them more closely connected with CSU and CU and doing, I mean, they spend millions of dollars every year doing research, much of it or tens of millions of dollars, much of it in concert with the local universities. Simultaneously, we've looked at, when I was looking at Mary Fallon and trying to figure out how do we get more vehicles using compressed natural gas. Right now we've got, you know, probably don't tell the other governors I said this, but our natural gas is probably a little bit too inexpensive. So Governor Fallon and I have been out there. We've now got 23 states signed up trying to go out there and convince each state that they should take a significant portion of their fleet and convert it to compressed natural gas. Governor Fallon and I went together up to Detroit, and actually it was great. We were sitting there with the senior vice president of new markets for Ford, the Ford Motor Company, and Eli says, "But aren't you a Republican? Aren't you a Democrat?" And we all had a laugh over it because, you know, this is not something that should be partisan. And so we're trying to look at how could some of that research around compressed natural gas vehicles be done at CSU and CU and get some of the investments from Michigan being made there as well. The bottom line is the solution to all of that is getting a closer connection between business community and the universities. And we put $100 million additional money into higher ed last year as well, but you need the business support as well.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, your governor, John Hickenlooper. I think, John, that stop sign was actually for me. so don't worry, you're okay. For those of you social media bugs out there, the hashtag is COEF14, if you want to hashtag that. We've got an honor today to have a distinguished panel in here. Congressman Bob Beaupre, candidate for governor, will be joining us shortly, and instead of you having to endure more Jeff jokes, we have an energy panel that will be coming up here. So if they'd like to join me on stage while I do the introduction. The energy panel is going to be moderated by today one of my friends, Peter Moore. Peter's a partner with the Denver office of the law firm Polsinelli PC. He is the founder and board chairman of Vital for Colorado. He's a current board member for the South Metro Denver Chamber of Commerce and was just recognized as Community Leader of the Year. Please welcome your moderator for this segment, Peter Moore.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. Very, very kind. Vital for Colorado is a grassroots statewide coalition of chambers of commerce, trade associations, business leaders, and citizens. And I'm pleased to let you know that as of last week, 30,000 Coloradoans had signed our pledge. I am going to introduce our three panelists who will discuss the impact of long-term, low-cost energy on the steel industry, on workforce development through local colleges, and on rural communities. Brad True from Nucor Corporation, and I believe that Nucor is the nation's largest steel company. Brad's a general manager of resource development for Nucor. He led Nucor's pursuit of long-term supply of low-cost natural gas, and that resulted in breakthrough deals with Encana Oil and Gas. Brad True understands the perspective of large industrial consumers who need the security of long-term natural gas supplies. We also have Bruce Beardsley from Ames Community College. He's the program director for the Oil and Gas Technology Program. Prior to coming to Ames Community College 2.5 years ago, he was the director of the Small Business Management Program at Lamarck College. Bruce has an extensive background as a problem solver. His program, he told me just before, now has 100 students, and this is very, very exciting development in terms of workforce development in Colorado. Dave Locke is the Senior Manager of Government Relations for Tri-State Generation and Transmission Association. Tri-State operates in 4 states, Colorado, New Mexico, Nebraska, and Wyoming, and it provides wholesale provides wholesale electric generation and transmission to 44 electric cooperatives. Dave will discuss the impact of high energy prices on rural citizens. Thanks, gentlemen.
You're welcome.
Brad, could you start?
Sure. Good morning. Thank you, Peter, very much for that introduction. I'm here speaking on behalf of the company I work for. It's a great company, Nucor. We are in America now. We're the largest steel producer. And as the largest steel producer, we are one of the largest consumers, both of electricity and natural gas. To put our consumption of gas into context, every year we use 60 BCF of gas, which is enough to power 850,000 residential homes. We have a very proud culture that values our workforce, puts high priority on safety, protection of the environment, and the communities in which we work. Let me talk a little bit about our competitive position and how important energy is to that position. Affordable energy supply for Nucor dramatically impacts our ability to compete effectively against foreign steel producers. And the steel industry is extremely globalized. Even today, something about 20 to 25% of the steel in this country is still imported. Many of the companies we compete against are government-owned and subsidized. The energy revolution that we've been living in the last 5 years in the oil and gas industry, enabled by fracking, has had a major influence on Nucor's ability to remain competitive. And we have committed $8 billion in the last 5 to 6 years in new capital investments. Much of that was only enabled because we've had an economy and a market and a demand and a supply of energy that has been possible through the development of the fracking technology. In particular, one of the investments that we required a long-term gas supply was made in Louisiana, and it's a plant known as a DRI operation. It is the biggest of its kind in the world. It just started up about 6 months ago. It was a $750 million investment in Louisiana. And really that fits into the larger story in America that we're seeing in manufacturing, where opportunities are being made possible for new manufacturing facilities to be built and in many cases to come back to the U.S. And it's only because of the big change in the production of gas and surging production of oil that we've seen. This revitalization of manufacturing, as you can imagine, is having a big impact on jobs, not only at Nucor, of course, but across industry. There are estimates that up to 5 million new jobs may be created in the manufacturing industry over the next 5 years, driven by this energy revolution. So it's impacting a lot of Americans. It's impacting our government's receipt of taxes. It's a tremendous benefit to our country. Let me comment very briefly on our position here in Colorado, why Nucor is here today. We are one of the few manufacturers that not only is a consumer of gas, but also a producer. We made a investment, a commitment with Encana several years ago in a very long-term drilling opportunity in western slope of Colorado. And through this partnership, we'll be investing billions into Colorado in the next 10 to 20 years. So we've made a major commitment in this state. The gas that we are producing from these wells today, and we already have 300 gas wells together with Encana, is basically used as an offset for our consumption to gas. So it's critical to our future. We're very pleased that we're able to be in this state, benefit from the resources you have, and a partnership with a great company, Encana. We'd like to talk very briefly about infrastructure in the United States and how important that is. We heard comments this morning talking about the Keystone Pipeline, for example, and really that's just one small example of how important infrastructure is to the entire U.S. economy. We feel that infrastructure has been badly underinvested in for many years. In fact, the American Society of Civil Engineers recently estimated that there's $3.6 trillion in needed infrastructure in roads and bridges and pipelines. And we really need better leadership, frankly, in Washington and to some degree in the state level. And we're doing all we can to point out how important this is to the health of the economy. We certainly hope to see more money and more attention given to infrastructure. We want to touch on regulations and how important that is to companies like Nucor and how important it is to the oil and gas industry. Businesses need regulatory certainty. Uncertainty makes it very difficult and sometimes impossible to go forward with investments and decisions. And just to put things into perspective, we think there's definitely some challenges right now in the U.S. in this field. The EPA, for example, has been studying fracking for several years, and they've postponed the completion of that until 2016, which is 4 years after they began it. There are proposed federal and BLM rules that would impact fracking, and it would frankly add confusion and duplication in an area where the states have historically led. And for example, here in Colorado, the state has done, in our view, a very good job for many years in regulating the fracking industry here in the state. So we think attention to avoiding the downside of either too much regulation or taking a long time to put it in place really creates a challenge for industry. And finally, we want to speak just directly to the issue of fracking, which has obviously been much discussed and has had a lot of publicity here in this state. First off, fracking is the technology that has made possible the increase in oil and gas production, the revolution that we talk about. State governments have traditionally had responsibility for regulating their oil and gas activities in their states, and we believe it should stay that way. Colorado, we think, has been a leader environmentally, and I think Senator Udall commented on that, and we would agree with that. There's been, or perhaps it was Governor Hickenlooper, but the Colorado has been a leader in this area, and we're proud to be in a state that has really set the pace in many cases for how oil and gas is regulated. And we're very proud to be a partner with Encana, which is we think has set the standard in many cases for industry. But the facts are that fracking has been done safely since 1947 on more than 1 million wells across the country. And the fact is that the EPA has never found a connection to chemicals entering the groundwater as a result of fracking. So we feel it's important to regulate responsibly, to not allow misinformation to stop the energy revolution that we're all benefiting from in terms of lower bills that we pay at home, a resurgence in manufacturing, and it's a tremendous boost to the whole country. So in closing, at Nucor, we like to say that we believe we can have the energy we need, the economy we want, and the environment we deserve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bruce Beardsley will discuss the Workforce Development Program at Ames Community College.
And if it's all, is mic working? I'll just sit here if that's okay. That way my knees won't be knocking over there and disrupt things. So I'll just stay here and hope I can sit on this chair long enough to not fall off. Ames Community College in Greeley, Colorado, saw a need several years ago with industry and the Workforce Center, Weld County Workforce Center, of training people to go into the energy industry. So they got together and built a great partnership. Weld County Workforce Center built a oil and gas task force, oil and gas being the main energy contributor up in that area. So we have an oil and gas task force. We built that. We got the industry involved in it. We've got educational pieces. All three of those have to work together to give you a good product. So from that, Ames decided to build this oil and gas technology program. Industry wanted technicians. One of the earlier speakers spoke about the School of the Mines and CSU and their programs. Well, not everybody is cut out to be chemical engineers or petroleum engineers, and we understand that at the community college level. And so we felt a need to train technicians because there's a big shortage of technicians out there in the industry. So our program is designed with the technician in mind. We have a 2-year associate degree in oil and gas technology, which, building on that, we have a certificate, an intro to oil and gas technology certificate, and we also have a production certificate that all build into that 2-year degree. We have a very strong advisory council committee that directs what we do. I'm not an oil and gas guy. I come from industry. They hired me to build and organize and put this program together. And that's what I did. With this strong advisory committee of 9 industry leaders, and not only the big guys, but the smaller service companies in the area, they give us advice of what they want to see in their new entry-level hires. And that's the program that we built. So Ames, 2 years ago, started a building on our Fort Lupton campus to house an oil and gas technology. So they built a $10 million building, which houses the oil and gas program and an ag program and part of a welding program. Also with a grant from the Department of Labor to put people back to work was the idea of the grant. We bought about $1 million worth of equipment to train our students. So this program has been going about 2 years. This next December, we'll have our first 2-year graduates. We've had quite a few certificate completers, but we'll have our first graduates from the 2-year program. A lot of the oil and gas companies, they don't want, because technology is changing. Things are changing out there in the oil and gas industry, and well, the whole energy industry. They want educated technicians. A lot of them have put caps on who they'll hire, or how many non-degree people they'll hire. And so we have 2-year graduates that'll be hired at a very good pay rate. And so if those students can't go or aren't, don't want to be engineers or go that route, this technical education is the way to go. So we continue to have our ongoing advisory meetings to tweak our curriculum to make it more beneficial for our students. Our students can go out in the energy industry, and only in the oil and gas. I looked up last year how many jobs our students would qualify. We're not teaching them, one specific job or 2 specific jobs or anything like that. We're teaching the skills to go across the board in a lot of different entry-level jobs. 136 entry-level jobs our students are qualified for once they graduate. So that puts a real good, gives them a greater opportunity to be hired. Plus, the cost of this 2-year degree is cheaper than a semester at School of the Mines. Okay, so we don't put our students in debt, a lot of debt, and they are financial aid eligible. So it's really a great program, a great partnership that we've built with industry. We have our students apply. We've got these relationships. We have our career coaches that helps our students through the process. So when a student applies at a certain service company, we can call that HR firm and say, or the HR department and say, hey, John Smith has applied. He's a graduate from our school, and they're being hired. Okay, Ames has a recognized program up in Weld County. We're also building on that to be internationally known. They've got international requirements curriculum that is also available. That we're becoming widespread, and that's a very big benefit to our students. So.
Bruce, could you just give some comment on some of the entry-level jobs? I don't want you to list all 136
sure,
of them.
and I probably couldn't list 136 of them, but they range from roustabout, hard labor jobs, and all of those. You mentioned hard labor and getting your hands dirty. There's a lot of technology that goes into them. Safety is a big concern out in the oil industry. So, we start out with roustabouts. We've got, drilling operators. We've got control room operators, automation technicians. A lot of the wells are all automated now. So the automation technicians are really important. So a lot of technology. Things change out there technically wise every day. And our students are right there at the very front.
And the follow-up question is in terms of wages for these entry-level jobs, just average.
Sure.
Wage range.
It ranges from $15 an hour to $24, $25 an hour for entry-level jobs. We had one of our students go become a control room operator at making about $60K a year. I'm thinking, where is it? Where do I sign up?
That's right.
Entry-level type jobs. because the need is there. The need is there.
Dave's going to discuss the effect of low-cost energy or high-cost energy on rural consumers.
All right, thank you very much. I don't know if this is on? No? Hello? I'll stand up.
All right.
Good morning. My name is Dave Block. I am with Tri-State Generation and Transmission. Tri-State serves 44 rural electric co-ops in 4 states. We have operations in 5 states. There are 22 rural electric co-ops here in Colorado. We serve 18 of those. And we supply them with electricity and transmission. On the generation side of electricity, we have a little bit of everything. We have coal, we have natural gas, we have hydroelectricity, we have solar and wind. If you count the amount of hydro that we have in our system plus the amount of renewable energy, upwards of about 25% of the energy we generate is from non-carbon emitting resources. On the transmission side of things, we are one of the major owners of transmission in the Intermountain West. We own about 5,200 miles of high voltage transmission that covers an area of about 200,000 square miles. Co-ops are not-for-profit entities. We're owned by our members. And the reason why I mention that is that the costs of doing business, including regulations, are all borne by those members. We have nowhere else to ascribe those costs to. They all are paid by the members. And who are those members? Those members are ranchers, our farmers, our small business owners, our residents from throughout rural Colorado. Congressman Gardner made an interesting point, and that is that higher energy costs have a disproportionate impact on lower income people. We serve, and our members serve, some of the lower income portions of the state of Colorado. So as regulations and other costs drive our costs up, it has a disproportionately negative effect on those people. I wanted to respond quickly to something that Governor Hickenlooper said. He mentioned a 111D rule, and that once EPA sort of gets done fixing it or tweaking it, that we'd basically be there. Well, unfortunately, that's just not the case, not for Tri-State anyway. The 111D rule, as you might know, has been proposed by EPA that would drastically reduce the amount of carbon dioxide that's emitted by power plants. They have set the levels of those emissions at rates now that are actually below what natural gas, what our natural gas units produce on a pounds per megawatt hour basis. That's how they measure it. And so and they've set the goal to basically start in 2020, and so in a very short time frame. There are a lot of people, including the Southwest Power Pool, that fear that if those regulations are implemented that quickly, that's going to have a serious impact on the reliability of the nation's electric grid. And so that's going to be something that's going to be critical to not only Tri-State, but to all of the electric generating utilities in Colorado and throughout the Intermountain West.
Dave, just a quick question. Are all the plants operated by Tri-State gas plants?
No, we have coal plants. We do have some gas plants as well. We have 2 different wind farms that we don't own and operate ourselves. They're through purchase power agreements. We just went out for an RFP to double the amount of wind that we have on our system. And we buy hydropower through the Western Area Power Administration, which is the operator of the large dams and reservoirs throughout the western United States.
Okay, thanks. You know, Brad, in your comments, you mentioned a 10 to 20-year investment by Nucor in Colorado. It may be a bit, I guess, premature, but could you give some description as to how that investment might roll out?
Well, it's a very long-term drilling commitment Nucor made with Encana to Nucor. And by say long-term, literally 20, 25 years. And essentially, to answer your question, we did take a pause this year in 2014 due to the low prices that were prevailing late last year for gas in that drilling program. But once we resume drilling, it'll slowly build up and become a pretty steady pace. So It'll be a significant economic activity when we get back to the drilling program, and it'll continue literally for 20 plus years.
And you also mentioned thoughts with regard to the onshoring and reshoring of major industry to America. I know that you're really talking about your company, but you know of other examples such as petrochemical and of the reshoring of industry due to the shale gale? Is that something that you can talk about for a moment?
Well, sure. You know, Nucor was probably one of the earliest to really see this, the impact that the shale gas was going to have in manufacturing. And we made our first commitment with Encana back in 2010, and that's also when we committed to go forward on the reshoring investment in Louisiana. But since then, there's been other steel companies who have followed in our footsteps. There's a project going on right now in Texas that's in a very similar vein as to our facility. And certainly in the chemical industry and the fertilizer industry and the plastics industry, there are projects going up primarily in the Gulf, but even other regions. I saw one announced just the other day, a $4 billion project up in, what is it, in the Dakotas, I think. But it's still coming. These projects take time. They're big investments. They have to be permitted. So a lot of them are still in the infant stage, but hopefully they'll continue to move forward. And really, we think the next 5 years are going to be, frankly, very exciting for the U.S. economy, driven by this.
Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Please join me in thanking our panelists. Did I mention that there's an election going on? Did you guys hear that? So the day that the ballots are on their way, we have all 4 candidates for governor and U.S. Senate here, and I think that is quite a coup, but a lot of work behind the scenes, and I want to recognize a couple people, Sean, Telby, Jenny, Sean, Rebecca, and John. Please join me in thanking them. The congressman is here, so we're going to do the same drill as before that we did with Governor Hickenlooper. The congressman is going to speak, and then I'll take some questions from our final moderator, Chad Vortham. Chad is the executive vice president of the Colorado Farm Bureau. He has been with the Farm Bureau for 12 years. The Farm Bureau represents 25,000 families all across Colorado. The mission of the Farm Bureau is to promote and protect the future of agricultural and rural values. Look forward to having your questions in just a second, but it's now my pleasure to introduce Congressman Bob Beaupre. Congressman Beaupre is a Colorado native. He was raised on a third-generation dairy farm and spent 20-plus years with his family working the farm. After his dairy career, Bob purchased and managed a community bank, growing assets from $4 million to over $400 million in just over 12 years. Bob serves as the state chair of the Republican Party and was elected to Congress as the first representative in the newly formed 7th Congressional District. Bob served 2 terms in Congress, serving on the Transportation, Ways and Means, and Veterans Committee. He dearly loves his wife, Claudia, his 4 children, and 4 grandchildren. Now, as a congressman comes up here, I'm just going to throw this out because politics sometimes gets a little interesting. And I'm glad you came from a dairy farm. I actually ran for office once, and somebody wrote a letter to the editor, and I'm quoting, "How can that guy from Highlands Ranch represent us when he doesn't even know where milk comes from?" You endure a lot? Please join me in welcoming our Congressman Bob Beaupre.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff, and thanks to each and every one of you. Yes, I do know where milk comes from. The cows were very, very good to us. Colorado's been very good to me. This is the only home I've ever known. 3rd generation on Dad's side, 5th on Mom's, Coloradans, and as I tell people, and especially as Claudia and I reflect on our wonderful life here, dreams we never even imagined dreaming came true for us in Colorado. This is a very, very special place. And I think most of us that call this home, whether we happen to be like me and a native or you came here by choice, you feel the same way, that it's very special. As I go around the state, especially in the last year or so, as I thought seriously about the challenge of running for governor and the opportunities that were in front of Colorado, I'd ask people, how you feeling? How's things going for you? And well, the very fact that we're here, people would say, well, we're good. We're in Colorado after all. But pretty quickly they would tell you, but not great. They feel a sense of anxiety, still got that knot tied in their belly, like something's holding them back. And you probe a little bit. And whether it was teachers in the classroom, farmers and ranchers like Claudia and I are, whether it was small business people or the big corporations, they would quickly get around when I asked the question, what's holding you back? What's got that knot tied in your belly? And they'd say, it's government. Government, and quickly they'd say regulations. We've kind of moved on from let's reduce our taxes to the big elephant in the room, and it's regulation. Even by the government's own measure, they have Small Business Association, or administration in this case, they measure this thing on an annual basis, and they tell us the cost of complying with federal regulations in our economy, $15, $16, $17 trillion economy, is about $2 trillion with a T dollars a year and continually going up. Now, I've gone and checked to see what the type of revenue from the taxation on business is, and that cost of complying with regulation dwarfs the amount of revenue created by taxation by a factor of about 8 to 10 to 1. So I asked people, and I haven't had a hand go up in a room yet, if anybody really thought that the reason that the economy was a little slow coming back in many places, including here in Colorado, a lot slow in coming back these last 5 years, the reason was that we weren't regulated enough. And that's the answer I usually get. Of course we're not. That freedom, the relief of government interference, constraint, restriction on us, that's what creates job growth and certainty in the market. But especially at a time when we went through a very tough recession and we wanted to come back, what has government done? At the federal level, about 85,000 pages of regulation a year. Add to that here at the state level about another 14,000, 15,000 pages a year. Almost 100,000 pages of regulation placed on our head year after year after year to restrain, to restrict, to control, to hold us back just like weights on our ankles. That's not Colorado, and that's not America. This is the place where government was supposed to believe and trust in people. It was supposed to be about freedom, after all, for people. And Thomas Jefferson, even among the founding fathers, he spoke very eloquently about it, that the biggest challenge for government is to restrain that government from interfering on the liberty, the rights, the commerce, the genius of people. I couldn't agree more. Generations later, another president told us, Ronald Reagan, he said it's just as simple as any law of physics. When government expands, freedom necessarily contracts. On the current governor's watch, and he probably told you about regulations they've reduced, 200 of those came from the Boxing Commission, by the way. They've also implemented 2,000, just in the last 4 years, 2,000 new regulations that have been put in place. Many of them focused on one industry, the energy industry. This is how I see it, ladies and gentlemen. We have never in the history of man harvested natural resources safer, cleaner, more efficiently than we can right now. We ought to be celebrating that, not punishing that. And on my watch, that will be the dramatic difference that you see. I believe and trust in people. People solve problems. Some apparently think that people create problems and that they can't trust you. That's why they want to restrict and regulate and control and restrain you. Do I want safe energy development? Do I want to protect our environment? Absolutely. In Jeff's nice introduction, he pointed out that I grew up on the land, and it's land not very far from here that we still call home, where Indian Peaks is, some of you may know. That's land that my grandfather worked very hard to hold together and then passed on to my dad and his brothers, and they worked equally hard to hold together. And then I had the privilege of working for a little more than 40 years of my life alongside my dad on that same piece of property. When you grow up on the land and it's more than just a living, it's part of your life, it's part of your DNA, those are the original conservationists. Now Claudia and I are blessed with a special piece of property up in North Park, up by the Wyoming border, and we're going to pass that on to our 4 kids. So if anybody wants to talk about protecting and caring about and for the environment, I'll stand right there and care as much as anybody. But what's going on in Colorado right now, we just as well be honest. It's not about making energy production somehow safer, cleaner. It's about driving it out of here. And that's simply wrong. I published a book in 2009, and I devoted a chapter to it. And I think the title of the chapter said something like this: Energy development for our economic security for sure, but for our national security as well. No industry, none that I know of, creates as many indirect jobs as does the energy industry. The Leeds School of Business right here in Boulder was asked the question, we create 1,000 new, you can pick your number, 1,000 new energy jobs, how many indirect jobs are spun off from that? And their answer was 4.6. We want to get this economy moving again, and by the way, if we had full employment in the state, the kind of labor participation rate we normally have in Colorado 5 years into supposed economic recovery, we're about 200,000 jobs short. We want to get this economy moving again, not as is going on in Mesa County right now over in Grand Junction, where they've got negative growth last year, 5 years into a supposed recovery, negative growth. Colorado Springs, negative growth last year. Pueblo barely kept their nose above water, economic growth-wise. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not a recovery, and it's wrong. And the key to unleashing the genius of Coloradans and the power of our economy is the energy industry. Let's utilize and celebrate that instead of restrain and hold it back. Opportunity's been going other places. Opportunity that should be ours, and it's measurable. Steve Moore and Art Laffer, 2 economists you probably quickly recognize. They rank the states 1 to 50 every year based on economic outlook and opportunity. 4 years ago, happens to coincide with the last gubernatorial election, by the way, for those of you that are keeping score. 4 years ago, they had us ranked number 2. And historically, Colorado, has been, according to them, in the top 5. Those of us that have been here a while would say that makes sense. We're usually that kind of a state. Even during tough times, we don't fall quite so far and we come back a little bit quicker because we're Colorado. But instead of number 2 now, or even in the top 5 now, according to Moore and Laffer, we've fallen to 22. And they explain why. Quote, recent legislative and regulatory changes made at the state level. That's why. Actions have consequences. George Mason University and a whole handful of other economic reports have got us the same place. Our economy has suddenly fallen to average among the other states. When was average ever good enough for Colorado? Not my Colorado. How do we get better? We get better by trusting in people, but also by auditing government. You ever been through a government audit? Here's your chance to turn the tables. We're already open for business. BobBeauPre.com/audit. You can send us your ideas. If we've got to repeal or amend legislation, let us know what it is that's not just standing on your toes, but right up around here and holding you back. If we've got to change the culture within the agencies of government, let's do that too. And I can do that on day one. In fact, on day one, I'm going to issue an executive order and suspend all new regulations. We'll just stop right where we're at. We'll go through everything top to bottom. And if it isn't pro-job, pro-freedom, pro-individual liberty, pro-economic growth, pro-believing and trusting in you, what the heck are we doing it for? We've had enough of government on the people. Let's get to government of, by, and for the people again. This is the greatest state in the greatest nation on God's green earth, and we can be great again. Not by continually holding people back, but by believing in them, empowering them, lifting them up, enabling them, and say, go get them, like Colorado has always done. My mission when I become your governor will be driven by a simple philosophy. If it isn't pro-defending, protecting, standing up for your freedom, then we're going to get rid of it, and I'll say no. Governors need to be decisive. Governors need to know where and how they want to lead this great state. I'm humbled by the fact that it's down to essentially John Hickenlooper or me. Out of 5.5 million people, that's a very humbling thought for a kid that grew up on a dairy farm in Lafayette, Colorado. But I think I've had the experiences in life for a reason. I love this state and this nation for a reason. And I believe very seriously in that old admonition that says, to those to whom much is given, much is required. If this is my opportunity to give back to a state and a nation that so richly blessed me, then I'm willing to and ready to embrace that challenge as well. God bless you for being here and for what you collectively do as an industry as well. We can be great again, and we can start 21 days from right now. Thanks very much, and I'll go join Chad.
Thank you for joining us. You bet. Let's start off. First off, it's always a pleasure to sit down with a farmer. You know, less than 2% of our population. It's good to sit farmer to farmer. Let's talk about the issue of the summer. That was local control, setbacks, a list of ballot initiatives that were as long as your arm. As governor, what would you have done this summer?
I would have just beat them. I thought it was necessary to take advantage of a political environment and an election year where it looked like these things could be beaten and beaten soundly and just make them go away. The path the governor chose, and you know, for those of you that are as glad as I am that at least they're not on the ballot, I would also tell you that the problem that he created in making them go away is that they didn't really go away. They're still here. He's got a commission that, by his own admission, is supposed to come up with yet more regulation to solve a problem that even he struggles to define in the debates we've had. I invited him to join me in condemning these, I thought, extremely draconian ideas coming from Jared Polis and his special interest groups. And let's just go beat them back once and for all. It's not a fight we invited. It's one that they brought. But it's a fight that I believe that, along with the support from the energy industry, that we could win and win decisively this year. It was trending that way. And now what we've got is, by Polis's own admission and others on the commission, the likelihood that they'll be back in 2015 or 16 anyway, the uncertainty of what that political election environment might be like, and maybe worst of all, this continual uncertainty that exists in the marketplace. That's not how businesses, or where businesses like to invest. And that's what I think has been damaging Colorado for a long time. We have handled, you know, I did it myself I was involved in it myself in my own community of Lafayette. We did a development there. There were mineral leases in place then. And we handled them in that development just like Colorado's historically done it. You bring all parties together, you reach a memorandum of understanding, You protect everybody's rights, but you do it by agreement and negotiation. The good news is now today with the technology we have, specifically directional drilling, horizontal drilling, multiple pads, multiple well sites on a singular pad, we can handle those issues far better than we've ever done. That's the kind of thing I was saying earlier we ought to be celebrating, not trying to punish. So what I would have done is beat them back, beat them soundly, make them go away, and create some certainty in the marketplace.
So now that the task force has been set, what do you see as an ideal outcome that they would come to a conclusion or compromise on?
Well, any compromise that they reach is going to be more regulation. And I'll ask it again. Does anybody really think that more regulation is going to get our economy moving? Or that, what problem exactly are we trying to solve? I think it's a solution in search of a problem. So I don't expect, I don't know what the governor suggested a little while ago, but I don't expect much to come out, if anything, to come out of this commission. He was asked that question the other night in one of our debates, the Channel 9 debate, and his answer was essentially, well, if the commission fails to come up with this magic elixir new regulation, that then it would fall to him and the legislature to come up with some magic elixir new regulation. You know, here's what confounds me, Chad. We have the most restrictive regulation on the oil and gas industry of any state in the nation. I think that's the way he explains it. And that was before the air quality emissions. And now he's telling us to get ready for some more regulation. At what point do you recognize what's already reality, that that's costing us investment and jobs and production in Colorado that could benefit Colorado and the nation? I have a very different idea of how to support and encourage the energy industry. I think we've got quite enough regulation. If there's some we could roll back, I'd look forward to doing that. But the first thing is to say no more, stop, and then we've got to open up some more land. The federal government, with the support of this governor's administration, has continued to deny access to a whole lot of federal land that I think Colorado ought to have the opportunity to go get the resources on. So I look forward to pushing back on the EPA and back on the BLM, back on the Obama administration, and trying to get access to much more of our resources and harvest them rather than less.
Let's talk about the EPA and the pending carbon emissions on coal-fired power plants. Colorado currently generates approximately 2/3 of our electricity from coal. What specific actions should Colorado take to prepare for these EPA regulations?
Make sure we can keep our coal plants open. Look, we've got some of the world's highest quality coal right here in Colorado. And you know that much of the world, I know you know this, much of the world is opening coal-fired plants. Germany opened one, I think it's within the last year. I read a press release from their energy department praising the fact that even in uber green Germany, where they set the standards, the emission standards so tight that the plant that was built actually exceeded their standards. That's the key takeaway here, folks, is that we can solve these problems not by eliminating one of the key resources that we've got. We've got 25% of the world's coal in the United States, and some of the highest quality coal in the whole world right here in Colorado. Let's use the advanced clean coal technology to benefit all of us and keep these plants open and benefit our economy. We can solve this problem not by further restriction for restriction and regulation's sake, but by relying on the genius of people to use it ever cleaner and ever better. I was at the 20-mile coal mine for a change of shift, 6 o'clock one morning not long ago. And I met a gentleman who told me he was a fourth-generation coal miner and has a son. But he said, I'm worried that my son's not going to be able to be the fifth. What's government's role in denying that kind of opportunity when it really defies logic, at least my logic?
let's talk about coal and the jobs that are created in Colorado. It seems like we're seeing more and more coal exported, not only out of Colorado, but out of our country. How would you work to support Colorado's workers in this struggling industry and the revenue it generates?
Well, I think it's a key. If for whatever reason we don't want to burn coal in the U.S., much of the rest of the world does, and if we really want to help the environment, and somebody's going to be burning coal, why not use the high quality, low sulfur, low mercury coal we've got here in Colorado? We've got the rail system, we've got the workers, we've got the resource in abundance. I would look to expand that export opportunity for our coal, and I would toss in our natural gas resources as well. I think that's an enormous opportunity, and as a governor, I'd like to align with other governors. I've already started these conversations, and pressure the federal government to open export ports to help us move much of our natural gas resources to much of the world that is relying on places like Russia right now and being held a bit hostage by Vladimir Putin. I think this is opportunity for Colorado, and we ought to be seizing it.
Very good. Let's switch over and talk about training our workers for the future. As a parent, someone that just sent my daughter to kindergarten a couple weeks ago, education's obviously important. All the way from elementary school to our colleges and universities, we're hearing about STEM training and STEM education. What needs to be done? What role does government play in encouraging more STEM education, and that we have workers ready for our energy industry?
I want to talk very specifically about at least 3 points. One, recognizing what I could tell as you mentioned your daughter going off to kindergarten. Nobody loves a child more than their mother and dad. We ought to expand the opportunities for choices for mothers and dads to determine where and how their children get educated. We ought to expand the choices of charter school and homeschool to support that, to private schools. We ought to expand every option available to do what we always say it's about. It's about the children. Well, let's trust mothers and dads to figure out that best option and make sure a multitude of those options are available. Secondly, we've got to end what I think is an absolute shameful scandal in Colorado, and that's the level of third grade reading proficiency. Unfortunately, in Colorado today, about 30% of all of our little 8 and 9-year-olds can't read at grade level proficiency. And last year, the test scores that just came in about a month ago showed that our test scores got worse by almost 2 full percentage points. In our minority community, it's even worse. About 44% of Hispanic and black children can't read at grade level when they're 8 and 9 years old. And we know how that usually turns out, not well. They quickly realize I can't do the work here, so I don't like it here, so I want out of here, and it doesn't work out well. So if we want more engineers and more scientists and more skilled workers, we've got to extend the promise to all of our children and give them the opportunity to learn by giving them the opportunity to read. The governor signed legislation 3 years ago called the READ Act that was supposed to solve this. But he hadn't led on it. And as I just said, the facts are test scores just got worse. Other governors have solved the problem by identifying the children early, getting the prioritization for tutorial help, reading professionals assigned to them early, and by solving the problem so that instead of leaving, wanting to get out of school, we know that if they can read at grade level in third grade, 95% will go on and graduate from high school. 95%. That ought to be our objective. Now on to your mission. We need to expand not only the choices for STEM education. Our charter schools typically are doing a wonderful job. Some of the schools are absolutely astounding what they're achieving with kids if we can get them there and get them started right. But we need to expand what's now called CTE, Career and Technical Education. It's the old VOTEC model that I came from. But we need more welders too. We need more tradesmen. We need more craftsmen. And we do need more engineers and people to work in the high-tech industries and aerospace industry. But a lot of that can be provided by utilizing CTE within our high schools. My friend Mike Pence, who's governor in Indiana, now has universal career and technical education in every public high school in Indiana. I think that that's an objective Colorado ought to embrace as well, and provide educational opportunities to our young people so that when they graduate from high school, if they want to get right in the workforce, they've got employable skills, good employable skills, that we can use to expand this Colorado economy, and they can use to stay here and do well in Colorado.
Certainly the technical college route or shorter two-year degree is a key. Do you see that as a way to address the gap that is currently there between those getting ready for the workforce and the workforce that's needed?
Yeah, and we're increasingly filling it, but we're not quite there. I was talking to one of our university professors yesterday, and they told me that there's 38 different places in Colorado, public as well as private, institutions to go to get a bachelor's degree. We need to expand those kind of choices for those that aren't necessarily inclined to look at a 4-year or even a graduate degree program. Those are great, and we ought to have them, and we ought to support them, and I want to continue to support them. But we have to also recognize that a 4-year degree or a master's program may not be for everybody. And that's where we need to be focusing some attention, is, as you called it, that gap where we're leaving way too many behind that are coming out of our high schools, in some cases coming out of our universities, and don't really have those readily employable skills. The aerospace industry is starving for engineers. I know the energy is starving for workers that are capable of these high-paying, very good quality jobs. We can encourage the solution to that. 3 parts to it. One of the key parts is making sure that at least every child who can learn how to read and eventually be eligible for that kind of training, an opportunity, that we're giving them a fighting chance in 3rd grade.
Thank you.
You bet, Chad. Thank you. Thanks to all of you.
Let's give Congressman Beaupre a round of applause.
Chad, phenomenal job. Again, please join us in thanking Congressman Bob Beaupre.
That way? Okay. Thank you, Chad.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to bring up Andrew one last time here to put a wrap and thank all of our sponsors. These things do not come off as easily as some of you may think they do with candidate schedules. I'm not going to mention the candidate, but I must have received about 35 emails and 10 phone calls just on simple logistics as far as door and entry and parking. And so there's a lot that goes into this and getting schedules on this important day. We've got some great sponsors, and Andrew's going to come up and put a wrap on that. So again, thank you for being here. Our pleasure from the Colorado Business Roundtable.
Hey, thank you, Jeff, and thank you for being a great MC of the event. Andrew Browning with Consumer Energy Alliance, and I'd like to thank the candidates and their staff for joining us for today's Colorado Energy Forum. The ballots are in the mail. Energy is one of the top issues for the Colorado voter, and I think that we've been able to provide the public with a deep dive on all the candidates' positions on a wide range of energy issues, and I think it's I just want to thank their staff and them for helping us do a fantastic event. I'd also like to thank the audience for taking time out of their busy day to come be a part of this important event. As you can see by the rotating logos behind us, we've had more than a few supporters and sponsors for this event. It's a great group that spans the Colorado economy, and I'd like to just list them off real quick and thank everyone. Consumer Energy Alliance, Vital for Colorado, Colorado Farm Bureau, Colorado Motor Carriers Association, Club 20, Colorado Business Roundtable, Colorado Energy Coalition, the South Metro Chamber of Commerce, the North Metro Chamber of Commerce, the American Association of Blacks in Energy, the Grand Junction Chamber of Commerce, Action 22, the Denver Women's Chamber of Commerce, the Denver South Economic Development Partnership, the Colorado Association of Commerce and Industry, Action 15, the Denver Hispanic Chamber, the International Brotherhood of Electric Workers, Local 111, and the Denver Regional Council of Governments. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for a successful show. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.